Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. You know who would have the best lived experience to sit on the Washington State Sex Offender Policy Board, while also bringing much needed diversity to its recommendations? Convicted sex offenders. It's almost as brilliant as that one time New York City asked a convicted cop killer to sit on a board to recommend policy changes for the NYPD to do their jobs better. So he could lecture the colleagues of the cop he executed. And yes, this brilliant plan in Washington was dreamed up by an ex-con who now serves as a Democrat representative. Tara Simmons, the sponsor of the bill, spent about 2.5 years in prison for theft, drug, and firearm charges. Oh yeah, and she wants to change the name of the board because it's offensive to the convicted sex offenders from whom she says we can learn so much. And it's not just the liberal state of Washington, but also the World Health Organization that is doing this. Reading now from the Daily Wire, quote, "The World Health Organization established an expert advisory group on transgender health, seeking guidance from a transgender former prostitute who called the line of work empowering, and an academic attempting to popularize gender effing as a critical legal theory." The WHO's Guidelines Development Group on the Health of Trans and Gender Diverse People was established to facilitate the creation of guidelines aimed at increasing access and utilization of quality and respectful health services by trans and gender diverse people, and establishing health policies that support gender inclusive care and legal recognition of self-determined gender identity. Among the experts named by the WHO is Erica Castellanos, who the WHO says is a trans woman living with HIV from Belize who resides in the Netherlands. Castellanos, a former prostitute, is a member of the International AIDS Society, where he focuses on youth engagement and HIV activism. It also includes Florence Ashley, an assistant professor at the University of Alberta and former clerk at the Supreme Court of Canada, who the WHO describes as a trans feminine jurist and bioethicist whose work focuses on trans issues in the legal and healthcare systems. His most recent work is on how to use gender effing as a strategy to resist gender governance, end quote. There's a lot of talk about criminal rehabilitation these days, but have you noticed that no one actually believes it? It's like all the other big buzzwords of our day: fairness, equity, inclusion, which often mean the very opposite of what they're supposed to mean. In this case, whether we're talking about rehabilitation or criminal justice, all the leftists in power mean is to make it easier for criminals to keep being criminals and to make people sympathize with their supposed struggles. Like how the race riots we deal with every few years is part of the process of canonizing a new criminal martyr to be worshipped by putting BLM Marxist fists or black squares in your social media bios so that the left-wing angel of death will spare you and your family. It's like how these knuckleheads in D.C. made excuses for the people chronically robbing a CVS in D.C. that couldn't keep its own shelves stocked because of the rampant theft, with the items literally being sold openly down the street for heavily discounted prices. And now the store has had to recently shut down and now cue all the complaints about systemic racism causing food deserts, where residents have to travel further for groceries because all the stores in their area are shut down. Anyway, here are those residents defending the looting.
I'm stuck. I mean, it's bad to do. At the same time, they're probably doing it for a reason. They need those things, but they shouldn't just be going in and clearing the shelves because this isn't sustainable for the store.
A lot of folks actually can't afford any of the things in there. I'm not saying that ceiling has to be the solution to that, right? However, I don't know, maybe if the city could provide more accessible resources to unhoused or under-income folks that can provide them like hair care, bodily care, hygiene care, etc., that could be an option.
Even our own Supreme Court this week basically ruled that illegal alien criminals have a right to storm our southern border unopposed, as the feds can cut down the concertina wire that Texas uses to protect its own citizens from this onslaught. Thankfully, Governor Greg Abbott says the fight isn't over, and he spent the last 2 days putting up even more wire as his agents stare down the rival federal ones. Joining us now to discuss all this and more is military defense attorney Davis Younts. Davis, thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening.
Great. So some are saying that Abbott here has a chance to be one of the most consequential political figures in American history since Lincoln. Do you think that's true? Does he need to hold his ground in Texas on this?
He absolutely does, and he has an incredible opportunity to remind us that we are a constitutional republic. This is a critical issue for so many reasons, but one of them is, the Constitution is not a suicide compact for the states. from our founding, and repeatedly our laws have recognized that states are sovereign and that individual states have the ability not only to protect their own state borders, but to protect their citizens. So here we have a situation where the President of the United States, the federal government, is being absolutely derelict in their duties. They are ignoring and intentionally circumventing existing federal immigration law and leaving the state of Texas with no choice. So I hope that Governor Abbott stays strong and pushes this issue both on the ground and in the court system to defend his people. We need Texas and other border states to take this kind of a stand to defend our nation, because people are dying and there is no sovereignty left for our nation or the state of Texas if we don't take this stand.
You know, and it just kind of goes back to this overall theme tonight with these 3 or 4 different stories that we've touched on, this idea of rule by criminals. You know, that a lot of the people coming in across the border illegally, well over 10 million, I think, at this point, just under Biden alone. And that's in addition to the 11 to 22 million that we had come in prior to Biden taking office. But it was something I was talking about last night with Libby Emmons, the senior editor of the Post Millennial, or the editor-in-chief, actually, I should say. But we were talking about that when these people, by and large, come over, it's not that they're coming saying, oh, God bless you, and thank you so much. Any little bit helps, you know, like maybe the hobo on the side of the street may say with his little cup for spare change. A lot of times they're coming over saying, I deserve what you have, and I'm going to take it. You can afford it, and they may blame racism, colonialism, capitalism, whatever system that they want to blame, it doesn't matter. The idea is they come over and they say, I deserve what you have, and I get to take what you have. Give it to me now. And that is the big problem that I have. So whether we see that at the border or we see that with your common criminal that we have exploding everywhere, right? It seems everywhere you go, stores were getting boarded up. There's looting. I was just driving to church on Sunday and saw a car getting broken into here in California. It's just sadly the way it is today. And then in DC, you see them making excuses. They'll try and cover it up and say, well, looting's bad, but... And once someone says but in a context like that, you can forget everything that they just said before. But what do you make of this idea that we're literally putting criminals on policy boards to recommend changes for society, to write laws? And we, the rest of the people, just look at this and go, you know, I sympathize with that. I sympathize with the criminal. Yes, let them rule over us and dictate what we should or shouldn't do.
I mean, not only is it absurd, it is not sustainable for any society that wishes to remain free. You cannot do this. We are turning everything into the lowest common denominator, and we're creating a situation where businesses cannot survive, where people cannot live in peace. People can't drive to church on Sunday morning without seeing a crime occur. I was driving through Detroit for a military case, and it was the outskirts of Detroit, the suburbs, and I watched a liquor store robbery happen while I was driving by. This is unheard of, that we are tolerating this, and the solution to it is not to take hard stands. It's not to bring back morality and bring back ethics. It's to allow the criminals to control the outcome. So you have the state of Washington saying the people that should be in charge of sex offender registries are registered sex offenders, and you have the WHO putting people who are mentally ill in charge of policy ideas. So there's a great reason why no taxpayer money should go to the WHO. But again, what is happening in the state of Washington that this is being tolerated? People are leaving in droves, and it's no wonder why. We cannot have the inmates running the asylum and expect anything other than chaos.
You know, and you're so right. In the WHO, I mean, prostitutes, that's illegal. That's criminal activity. I mean, on and on it goes. And then they want to advise young people on how not to get HIV. But, you know, I'm pretty sure those transgender individuals talking about prostitution would say sex work is sex positive and is actually a good thing. We just saw that happen in New York, actually, just the other week. There was a woman in New York City. I'm sure you saw the video, and she was high on marijuana. She admitted at the time, and yet she mentors young people to stay away from drugs. And she's a criminal justice graduate. How perfect is that? She sees a cop standing in the road. He's trying to block off streets because it's a crime scene, and she plows straight into him. She later admits she did it on purpose. She says she told the cop to move. He says you can't drive down the wrong side of the street, and it's blocked off for a crime scene. She goes, move anyways. He doesn't move, so she hits him, he breaks his leg. I mean, on and on it goes. Everywhere you look, like you said, it's the criminals running the asylum at this point. Do you think part of it is that we don't have good heroes to look up to anymore? We used to look up to our guys in World War II, right? Our military guys who'd go off to war, kids who'd be 15, 16 years old, lying about their age so they could go fight abroad to go, protect those that they loved here at home. We're tearing down the statues of our founding fathers. Anyone who did anything in their life positive whatsoever, we've torn down. And now what do we look to? We just look to criminals to idolize. We look to people, like you said, the lowest common denominator. Maybe it makes us feel better because a lot of people are dealing with a lot of issues. They don't feel like they've achieved what they should have with their lives. But now they just look down at just a morass of just sadness and debased debauchery. And I guess it makes them feel better by comparison. But I mean, that's no way to lead a culture, is it?
No, what we have done is we have turned everyone into a victim, and we have made victimhood heroic, and that is a huge problem. And it's to me, it's a lie that's related to sin. It's this idea that sin doesn't have consequences, and when there are natural consequences from sin and not following God's law, that we should praise those who are falling prey to those consequences. But if you don't work and you don't pursue wealth and you don't try to take care of your family, you're not going to have the things that you need to take care of yourself. Or we have people that are coveting, and it's simply a matter of they have food, they have the ability to take care of themselves, but they want more and they don't want to wait for it or work harder for it. So they covet and they go and they take what's not theirs. The problem is ultimately it creates a cycle of violence, and it just creates a sin cycle with consequences for everyone. So we need to really be looking deeply into our souls. We need to be returning to church, and we need to understand we cannot continue without a foundation, and all of it comes together because we have a nation that cannot sustain itself if you have people coming over the border that do not share our values. If you have people coming over the border that want to destroy our nation, there are going to be consequences, and we're going to continue to see them. And we do need heroes, but those should be heroes that are a reflection of Christ in the world today and that are seeking to follow Christ. Those are the real heroes we need. But without them, it's only going to get worse.
That was perfectly well said, Davis. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Take care.